Thank you all so much for being here. My name is Marissa Rathbone. I am your Director of Strategic Advocacy with the Washington State School Directors Association. For some of you, this is like your 20th LedRep Network meeting. Thank you to the veterans coming back. And for some of you, I think I see some fresh faces. This might be your new or first LedRep Network meeting, and then lots of folks in between. So thanks for being here. If you're not a LedRep, that's okay too. This is for school directors. And we try to tailor the message to LedReps in particular, because if you are a LedRep, you know that you have some responsibility in communicating to your fellows on your board what some of the activities are going on as it relates to advocacy work year round. So either legislative advocacy work directly, or in this case, as we'll be talking about today, some of the WSSDA advocacy work and your roles around General Assembly. So today's primary focus is going to be on preparing for General Assembly. And I'll just give you a little heads up that I'm going to be asking you some questions, because this is the first of many pre-training opportunities for General Assembly. And as we think about how to prepare the best content for you, I'm going to be asking you, what are some of the things that you really need to know in order to be best prepared to go into General Assembly, either as a voting delegate or just as a board member observing or helping your fellow school directors get prepared. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. I've got quite a few materials to share with you, and what I will do is, to the best of my abilities, put those materials in the chat, and then also send a follow-up email with the materials to all of the LedReps so that you have access. So I'll come back and forth so that we can see one another's faces, but otherwise I'll be sharing my screen. If you wouldn't mind introducing yourself in the chat while I'm doing that, it'll give you something to do while I'm navigating technology. Go ahead. Your name will just be affiliated when you type it in, your school board, and how many years you've served as a LedRep. And if you're not a LedRep, just how many years you've served as a school director. Okay. So with that, today is a big day for WSSDA, and therefore for you, because after years of planning and working behind the scenes, and in particular, Sean Duke, who is our communications officer, diligently working hard to make a better website for you to access our information, WSSDA launched a brand new website today. So perhaps you didn't know, it may not have been top on your list of things to pay attention to today. It was pretty high up on the top of our list. Everything worked, nothing blew up inside the building, so that's good. And I wanted to give you a chance to see it and help you navigate through. In case you were wondering, everything on the WSSDA website is the same as it was before. It just has a different look and feel. It's organized in a way that is a little bit more user-friendly. The goal here is that we're creating tools that are accessible to you in the best possible way. So sharing screen. This is good. While you're typing your names, I'm navigating some of my technology. I knew that was going to happen. I'll just pull up the web. All right, I am seeing, Sarah, can you give me a thumbs up that you at least see Google in front of you? And now WSSDA website. Nice, thank you.
Wow.
That's the kind of reaction I like. Oh, wow, we get a verbal wow. All right, that's good. Okay, so like I said, the content is largely the same, although some of the language, to be very member focused, very member centered, has been rewritten. So I would pay attention to the details of this. The ultimate goal was that this website is more accessible to you, most specifically and most importantly, and then also to the public, because the public is curious about what school directors do and how WSSDA helps to support and serve them. So hopefully you're able to find the right information and the information you need. For instance, this kind of information has been fleshed out in more detail. I really love this page, who we are. It talks about the members. WSSDA is people, that's you. You are WSSDA, the 1,477 locally elected school members across the state. The staff that supports you. We have usually around 15 full-time staff, and then a host of contractors that have very specific roles. And then we often refer to the WSSDA platform. And so I realize this isn't General Assembly specific, but we do often refer to what we call the WSSDA platform. And we wanted to lay out that the WSSDA platform is more than just the WSSDA positions. The WSSDA platform is really your member adopted equity statement, vision statement, mission statement, goals and beliefs, and legislative and permanent positions. So when you think about the WSSDA platform, it is all encompassing about your beliefs, your values, and those issue areas you're interested in advocating for. So you've got the WSSDA equity statement, which is also a member adopted position in our WSSDA positions platform. You've got a vision statement, mission statement, your goals. There are 8 of them currently. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of them currently. Your belief statements, and then 225 current legislative and permanent positions combined. So there's a lot of information on all here, but I love sort of this thinking around the WSSDA platform being very comprehensive and inclusion of a lot of different perspectives from our membership. There's a lot more information on this website. We're not going to go through all of it today because I really do want to focus on General Assembly. So with that, I'm going to take you up to training and events. So when you think about General Assembly, it's one of our main events of the year. General Assembly is where you adopt your bylaws, legislative and permanent positions, and then annual conference is a bigger event. But both events we actually plan throughout the year and respond consistently throughout the year on members' questions, considerations, and feedback on making the best possible events for what you're interested in. And these 2 events really are our keystone events each year that take a whole year to plan for. So General Assembly. On the day of General Assembly, so let's start with some of the logistical details. General Assembly is held September 20th and 21st this year. You can note in your future calendars, because I know you're thinking about wanting to be part of a General Assembly every year in perpetuity. They will always be held the 3rd Friday, Saturday of the month of September. So the 3rd Friday, Saturday of every September. And on the day of the event, if you are participating virtually, which you will have the option to do, either as a voting delegate or just as an observer, you'll enter the virtual General Assembly at this link. Once you go to this link the day of the event, you will either log in as an observer or a voting delegate, and then the voting delegate login will have credentials, basically a login, a unique login and password for your school board. All that information will be sent to the voting delegate once they register. The registration has been sent out through our member update directly to your school board. If you have not received that information, I would ask your school board president where that might be if you in fact are responsible for registering. We've got about 20 people who have registered for virtual and about 5 people have registered for in-person at this point in time. So you've still got some time, that's okay. But once the day of occurs, you will log in here. We're going to go through the handbook in a little bit at a high level, but if you haven't downloaded the handbook yet, I would highly encourage you to do so, noting that this is version 1 of the handbook. And the reason why it's version 1 is because currently there is an amendment process that is open that will close tomorrow, which is Wednesday, August 7th at 5 p.m. It opened at 8 a.m. on August 1st. That was last Thursday, and closes tomorrow. So there was a week window for the submission of online amendments. And we started announcing that amendment window would be open back in the spring, with the anticipation that you'd have the month of July to review the version 1 of the handbook, consider as a board what amendments you wished to submit, and then have that 1 week window to submit those amendments. We've got a handful of amendments in already at this point in time. I anticipate that the majority of them will come in the final hours. That's okay. You all have busy lives, so sometimes we have to wait until the last minute or nothing would get done. So not quite sure how many we'll have in the version 2 handbook, but you will see what those amendments are right around August 16th, which is a week from Friday. And that will be the second and final version of the General Assembly Handbook. So just be sure, as you and your fellows are preparing for General Assembly for the September 20th and 21st event, that you're using the version 2, which will be available a week from Friday. It'll include all of the amendments. On the day of the event and in between now and then, you are always welcome to reach out to me directly. Many of you have my cell phone. If you don't, I will be sure that you have it here today, but it's also plastered all over our website. So you can text me, you can call me. However, the day of the event, it might be hard to reach me directly because I will be focused on providing support and services actually on site at the event. However, we will have at least 2, if not more, full-time staff who are managing and monitoring assembly at WSSDA.org for the duration of the 2 days, which means that if you're having trouble logging on, if you can't figure out how to get onto the Wi-Fi, if you're there in person, if you can't find your credentials where we might have emailed them to you, if you can't figure out how to log off and pass your credential to another school board member who wants to step in your place, if you have any questions about the logistics of things or what's going on, you are welcome to email assembly@wasda.org. That we will be monitoring that constantly, and we'll have a few folks who are really good at technology in particular. That tends to be one of the main questions that comes up around some of the technical aspects of logging in and participating. So feel free to save that email address so that you can reach out at any time. Again, as a reminder, General Assembly is available to you to participate from anywhere in the state of Washington, either as an observer or as a voting delegate, and you can log on virtually. There's also the option to participate in person. If you are participating virtually, that registration is free. If you are participating in person, and you could be a voting delegate in person, you could also just be a member of the board participating in person. You can be in the room even if you're not voting. But there is a registration fee for each individual person who is there in person, so that we can offset the cost of the hotel room reservation as well as the food being served. It says registration will open later, but it's actually open right now. So I will talk with Sean. This is the thing about launching a website, is sometimes the things don't carry over. So I will be sure that is fixed so that registration link is available. The in-person location, in case you were wondering, is in SeaTac this year. This is the first time we've actually had it in SeaTac. We rotate, just like with annual conference, we rotate an east side location and a west side location every year. This time we are having it in SeaTac because it's more accessible for folks who may want to just fly in, go right to the airport, and fly out. All school boards are encouraged to participate. We have yet to reach 295 voting delegates. It is still my goal that we'll get there. I think we were right around about 130 last year. So not quite half, but a heck of a lot closer than we've been in years past. So again, only 1 voting delegate per board can actually vote on and debate on the positions at a time, but any of your school board members can observe, watch, and even potentially be in the room. You as the ledge rep have a very unique and important role. We hope that you are playing the role of keeping your board apprised to when the handbooks are released, when you should be discussing them in the month of July, when and if you hope to submit some amendments, and then who will be the voting delegate. It may be you, the ledge rep, but it doesn't always have to be. Oftentimes a ledge rep is brand new and doesn't feel comfortable serving as the voting delegate. Sometimes the ledge rep has other responsibilities and can't be present. So any member of your board could be the voting delegate, and you could even have more than one voting delegate throughout the course of the 2-day event. You just can only have one voting delegate at a time. So essentially we issue a voting credential for your board. One person on your board at a time can be representing using that login credential. Okay, I've been talking for a long time. I'm just gonna take a little pause and check the screen here and look at your faces and see if you're doing okay. Got some thumbs up, lots of information coming at you. Please feel free if you have any questions to put them in the chat. I'm going to review those questions now. Yes, so the amendment submission form is not available online because not everybody from the public gets to submit a form. If you do not have access to the form because you lost the email that came from WSSDA directly to your school board with your school board email, please feel free to reach out to me and I'll be sure that you have it. So if you are still hoping to submit an amendment before 5 o'clock tomorrow, please reach out to me and I'll be sure you get the amendment link. Sometimes we don't put links to various registrations or forms on the public facing website because it's a public facing website, and only you, school board members, get to participate in many of the WSSDA events and activities related to that. All right, good. Sorry to hear someone's having technical issues, but at least I know I'm not alone. And I'm just skimming to make sure there's no questions coming up. So I would just invite you, if you have questions, to go ahead and type them here in the chat. I will check this periodically to take a little breaksies. And then also I will come back and look at your faces. If you just want to raise your hand and ask a question, that's fine too. So, okay, back to the screen. Just a reminder that you have the opportunity to participate in the platform revision every single year. So if you just realize that you really wanted to change a word somewhere in one of our position proposals, but you didn't get it in the position window, and there's not a proposal currently in the book where you can submit an amendment to it, don't worry. You'll get an opportunity again next spring to submit your proposals then. So every spring, you'll have the opportunity as a board to submit proposed amendments to existing positions, or to propose new amendments, or I'm sorry, new positions that aren't currently in our platform. That will occur every single year. And what we as an organization are trying to do is to create basically an annual calendar that is consistent. One of the reasons that has been difficult, why the position proposal window has kind of been different every single year, at least in part because we've got a long legislative session and a short legislative session. And typically we've tried to wait to have the proposal window until after the legislative session concludes. And we are looking at how to provide an annual timeline that isn't dependent necessarily on the legislative session's end time, so that you can plan as a board accordingly. So where we are at in the timeline right now is we're right here in the midst of the amendment proposal window where it's open. It, like I said, closes tomorrow. If there are amendments that come forward to the same proposal, what we will as staff do is invite those boards who submitted those proposed amendments to come together in what we're calling an informal conference committee. We will only schedule those if necessary. So only if there's a proposal that got 2 or more amendments to them that are different, We will bring those boards together to have a conversation about the possibility of bringing just one instead of two amendments. So if they're close enough, perhaps there could be some agreement on the wording change being one and not the other. If those boards don't agree to coalesce around the same language, that's fine. We'll just have two amendments to that proposal instead of just one, perhaps. So that'll happen next week if necessary, but do count on a new General Assembly handbook being published next Friday. And then I'm going to walk you through there's one bullet here that's missing, and that's going to be pre-General Assembly training. And there are going to be multiple training opportunities, including this one, in between now and when General Assembly starts. I want to be sure that you have the opportunity to save those dates, but also if you can't attend, they will be recorded. Following General Assembly, there will be the opportunity to prioritize the legislative positions. And if you haven't participated in this in the past, just a reminder that legislative positions only are prioritized by your board, and your board has the opportunity to send your up to 15 most important legislative positions. And then from that prioritization, we curate all of those, we collate all the board priorities that we receive. And then the top 15, 10 to 15 are pretty clear. There's usually like, a bunch that get in the top 2 or 3. And then we've got a couple who are in the middle, and then a bunch that kind of just drop off that just have, 1, 2, 5 boards that voted for them, but not necessarily 60. I think 65 boards last year out of the 100+ districts that submitted prioritized special education funding. So that was a clear and obvious priority of many of our school directors across the state, school boards across the state. Legislative priorities will be announced once the legislative committee has an opportunity to give feedback and the WSSDA board formally adopts them. Just as another note, our priorities have been pretty consistent from year to year. Regularly, they end up being focused on necessary resources around special education, transportation, capital and school facilities, staffing, and school meals has been on the top of everyone's minds for the last couple of years. And prior to that, student mental health and wellness was also pretty high up there as well, comprehensive school and student safety. And then hopefully you'll be doing a lot of advocacy work in October, November, December, especially November, December, when your legislators are formally elected. And then we start the next legislative session on January 13th. Okay. So I'm going to stop sharing. Again, I would encourage you to peruse the WSSDA website. Let us know if you have trouble finding anything or you see something that is inaccurate. Want to be sure to correct that or get you answers to your questions. I'm going to stop share. I'm going to look to see if there are questions. All right. If we are having more than one director attending General Assembly in person, do we need to register all 3 with the payment, or is that only for the one voting delegate? It is actually each individual person pays their own registration, regardless if they're the voting delegate, because everybody who's there in person will be fed a meal and use the space and the Wi-Fi. So that's the cost that WSSDA is accruing. So we have to charge at least a nominal registration fee for the folks who are there in person. Great question. Okay, I wanted to next do just a sweep of the General Assembly handbook. We did this at the last LegRep Network meeting, but I want to just call your attention to a few of the resources that are in there. I'm getting all my screen up. And now I am sharing. Okay. So this is the version 1 of the General Assembly Handbook. So if you download or have already downloaded the General Assembly Handbook, this is the one that you will have. And a couple things that, again, I just think all of the positions and all of the proposals in the context are really important for you as a board to be going over individually. And please do that. In fact, that reminds me, I will share the spreadsheet with you that will help you go through each. As you're looking at the content, though, in order to prepare for General Assembly in terms of what you should know before you go, please read the rules of procedure. Please, please, please read the rules of procedure. There are a lot of words on these pages, but they are so critically important, and they really lay out for you and your board what you need to know before you go. Some of this is fairly intuitive or obvious, particularly if you've been doing this many times. Every public school is entitled to one voting delegate per board member. You must be a board member in order to participate in General Assembly because this is your organization and your positions, not the superintendents or the principals. They are very important, but they have their own process and their own organization to do this work. The regular agenda is laid out as part of the voting order. There is a consent agenda item, and you will see that at the very front of book this year. The consent agenda, actually, I'll walk you through it because it's important that you know it. But again, just read all of this so you know the process. You will have the opportunity to debate each proposal. One of the things that went awry last year that we really hope does not happen this year is that each proposal deserves a debate. And there may be a couple proposals that are just so unified in everybody's perspective that we don't have much debate at all. But certainly we want to avoid this call to question immediately before a debate can even occur. So that was one of the things that just didn't work very well last year. And we've really tried hard to make sure that we are encouraging folks to ask questions instead of calling questions. So if you have a point of order, that's one thing, but we want to give everybody the opportunity to speak either pro or con for those proposals that matter to them. As it relates to that, it will be standard as last year. There will be 10 minutes total per proposal. 5 minutes for those folks collectively speaking pro and 5 minutes collectively for those speaking con in no particular order. You will see as a participant or even just an observer that there will be timers on the screen. So you'll be able to see how much time is remaining for both the pro and the con statements. Point of order and other motions, like I said, we had folks use call the question really excessively last year. So what we are asking for folks to do this year is if you have a question about a parliamentary rule or really anything like where are we, where in the book, what proposal are we on, I missed that, point of order is the way to go. And there will be a drop-down menu. We will go over tech support closer to the event and actually on the day of. If you've never done this before, we hope it's fairly intuitive, but ultimately the things that you're able to do as a voting delegate are in a drop-down menu on the Lumi platform. Lumi is the platform we use for everyone to participate. And everybody uses that, regardless if they're participating in person or virtually. There will be the opportunity to make a motion. There are a couple situations where that will be particularly necessary, and we will go through that again closer to the actual event. If your board does not participate in General Assembly, you don't have a voting delegate, you don't get a vote. There's no voting proxy, there's no absentee or follow-up voting. You have to be present with a voting delegate in order to participate in General Assembly. That's one of the more important things to note here. And everybody will use the electronic voting system to vote. Again, even if they're in person, they use the Lumi platform consistently with the virtual participants to place their votes for each position proposal. So there's a little bit more here on rules of procedure, but those were some of the things I wanted to be sure to go through. We've talked already about the amendment process, but it's laid out here. Let's check this out, Sarah, to see if the amendment form, aha, see, it's in the handbook. So a little shortcut, the amendment proposal form is actually it's live linked in the handbook currently. So if you can't find it on the website, then you can go to the handbook and it's there. Anything you don't know there, all of that standard. And then how to read the book. So I am going to, I don't want to totally skim over this. Emergency proposals are an option. True emergencies, we've only had a handful in the last several years, but if your board is submitting an emergency proposal, that goes directly to the WSSDA board, and all the directions for that are laid out in this section. But because it's so rare that this is utilized, I am skimming through it because there are other things that are more commonly requested in terms of information to prepare. So voting order for position proposals. This is essentially your regular agenda. This voting order is going to change once we get amendments in, because we will, for instance, let's say we get a proposed amendment for the climate impact mitigation assistance. You're going to read this as 8 and then an 8A and an 8B. If there's 2 of them, so you'll be able to see that there are amendments associated with the proposal. During the actual event, however, we will take amendments first, because that's the way that it always goes in Robert's Rules of Order. So amendments come first, and then the proposal will be voted on last, if it's necessary, based on what the earlier votes are. So this is going to change around a little bit, but essentially the numerical order will remain close to the same. So this is something to also note. And then I want to just call your attention to a consent agenda, because in the past, when we have had a consent agenda item, it's usually been at the back of the book, and it was usually related to what we used to call, oh gosh, I can't even remember what they were. SLPs, standing legislative positions. We don't have those anymore. Positions are just positions, but we did have consent agendas previously. We are putting at the front because it is more common practice, as you know, being on your board, that consent agenda items usually come at the front of the meeting. And so the case is true here now as well. This consent agenda item would add consistent language to all of these funding related positions. I think there are 48 of them, if I remember counting earlier. So all of these positions listed here are legislative and permanent, and they relate to funding, state funding for schools. And they each describe the funding a little bit differently. What this consent agenda item essentially does is ensure the consistent language of amply, fully, and sustainably in front of each of the funding descriptions here. So if it just says fully funded, it would, if this consent agenda item were adopted, it would say amply, fully, and sustainably funded. I have had one question about what if there's another word there like equitably? Would that language stay or go away? That language would stay. So this is additive descriptive language, not replacing language entirely, right? So we're not removing words that are currently there. We're making sure there's consistent language in front of funding for any of those positions that are listed here. So if you were to adopt this consent agenda, this would be someone will have to move, and then 4 boards will have to second, and then there will be a vote. There will be an option to remove one or more of these if folks want to have a separate debate about them. And I'm not going to get into the details of how that process goes, but that is something that we can certainly cover closer to the event. And Mike Hoover is going to be my guy on how to walk you through that process if that's something you want to know more about. And then you get into all of the position proposals. So we basically have 3 groups. We've got bylaws, we've got legislative and permanent positions. The bylaws are following the consent agenda item. So we've got 2 bylaw proposals. I anticipate there will be amendments to at least one, if not both. So be paying attention to those. And then we will get to position proposals. And the way this is laid out is an order by category. So these are the categories of positions. So basically this helps you kind of think about what general topics the positions relate to. And then you'll see them intermingled by legislative and permanent positions and amendments, new, retired, and consolidated. So amendment proposals come first, new proposals come second, retirements, and then consolidations. There are only just a handful of retirements and consolidations, so you're mostly going to be deliberating over amendments to existing positions. And then new position proposals. But really the bulk of the proposals that you'll be navigating are amendments to existing positions. So pay attention to the details. Strike throughs mean it's proposing that language be removed from existing positions, and things that are underlined would be additive language to existing positions. So lots more there for you to review, but because we're getting closer, we've got a little over 20 minutes left. Sorry to make you dizzy. The other thing in the handbook I just wanted to be sure to draw your attention to, which will not change. This is a great new resource that we specifically included this year because you asked for it. It's sort of a high-level parliamentary guidance. This will be a great thing for you to have in front of you at General Assembly. In fact, I highly, highly, highly recommend that you print. If you haven't printed this one, don't bother. Wait until August 16th. Print the final version of the General Assembly handbook, even if you're not a voting delegate, just to have a paper copy in front of you. Unless at home you have the benefit of 2 screens and you can have the General Assembly on one screen and a electronic copy of the handbook on the right screen, some organization of that nature, I highly encourage you to have a paper copy. It also allows you to take notes, make notes. Perhaps you see something that you want to change for next year. You can make a note of it so you don't lose that train of thought. But in the meantime, I would review as a full board. This is just great parliamentary guidance for any time that you're using Robert's Rules of Order, making a motion, withdrawing a motion, postponing, ending the debate, et cetera, et cetera. So please do read all this and review it. It will definitely help you prepare. And then again, as we get closer to General Assembly, Mike Hoover, who will be your parliamentarian this year, will provide some additional training on parliamentary process. Let's see, we have a question regarding the consent agenda item. If there are new proposals or amended proposals which include funding language that are passed at General Assembly, will this language automatically change in the consent agenda item? Okay, so let me walk you through this. The only positions, okay, close your eyes for a second. I'm gonna go back up. Sorry. That's dizzy making. Okay, so the only positions that would receive this consent, so let's just assume the body votes in favor of this consent agenda item. That would mean that all of the positions that are listed here will receive the consistent language of amply, fully, and sustainably. So let's just assume that happens. But let's say later on down in the agenda, the regular agenda, there's a new position proposal that's about funding that doesn't include this language. This language will not apply to a new position proposal because those new position proposals are not on this list. That's okay. I'm going to use one of my favorite expressions that says it's progress, not perfection. The ultimate goal of revising your position so that there's consistent language is so ultimately you are using consistent language when you're talking with your legislators, and that we are, as an organization, aligned on what type of funding we're talking about. Is it fully? Is it amply? Is it sustainably? What is it? So we'll be, assuming that you vote this favorably, we would be in a better place than we are now in terms of consistency. Will it be perfect? No, but we can revisit it next year. So that's a long answer to that question. Let me make sure I got it. I think I got it. But in a nutshell, if the position isn't on this list, it won't be changed. Okay, great question. Love that. I'm going to move on because I've got a couple more things I want to review with you. Okay, if I can close it. Okay, I'm going to stop share. And then I'm going to close. Now I can close it. Clear out my screen. I'm going to put in the chat now the parliamentary guide. I just have the parliamentary guide as its own handout. It's kind of fun. You know, if you've got a laminator at home, you might be one of those people. You should laminate it. It's one of those things that you might want to save for yourself and give to friends. Everybody loves a good parliamentary guide. All right, that is in your chat here. I'm not going to give you the handbook because, again, it's going to change. If you've already printed it, it's great, but I would encourage you to wait until the next version, until you do your final print job. And if you don't have capacity at home to print that document, please ask your district office to do it for you as part of your professional duties. It is part of your work as a board member to have the materials you need to represent your board, and this would be one of those materials. Okay. I'm going to share a draft of the General Assembly schedule with you. So another common question that I get is, when do things start? When do things end? It's complicated. There's no clear answer to that because we got to get through everything in order to adjourn. So I'm going to put the draft in the chat for you to have access to. And you will note that there is a watermark on this that says draft, and then that watermark's going to remain because it is really subject to change depending on how the debates go and how long each proposal takes. But in a nutshell, we will get things started on Friday, September 20th at 8 a.m. We encourage every voting delegate to log in at 8 a.m. because inevitably, even if you think you're a pro or you've done this before, you might have some technical problems. And as such, we want you to be able to work all things out before we call it to order at 9 a.m. In between 8 and 9 a.m., we are going to do some orientation to the Lumi platform. I'm going to walk through how WSSDA advocacy works and how WSSDA uses member adopted positions in order to represent the membership with the legislature. And Mike is going to go again through Robert's Rules of Order and Parliamentary Procedure. So we're going to do this multiple times leading up to General Assembly. We're also going to do it on the day of. And why not just get a refresher, even if you think you know it all, just show up at 8 a.m., join us, get your technology worked out, have a cup of coffee. And then the actual meeting of General Assembly will call to order at 9 a.m. Your presiding officer is Sandy Hayes, who is the WSSDA board president. Much of the agenda or schedule is consistent from year to year. There will be a statement of the qualifications to act, the report of credentials, declaration of quorum. We definitely hope, and then some, an overview of the assembly, and you adopt the rules of procedure and the order of business. You will hear from your legislative and resolutions committee chairs, Lakeisha Phillips and Trey Ising. And then position deliberations will commence at 9:30. And so these are all rough estimates. And so the times that you see here are based on the potential that each proposal in the current handbook takes 10 minutes. In our experience, that is not the case. Sometimes position proposals, a 2/3 vote extends the conversation longer than the 10 minutes that's allotted. That's okay. Some proposals don't even take 3 minutes. So it's really hard to totally, I mean, we can estimate, but we certainly don't know with any certainty how long General Assembly is going to take. But if each proposal, if we have 47 of them, as is currently in the General Assembly handbook, we will recess at 5, reconvene at 9. If each one took 10 minutes, we could conclude at 2 p.m. on Saturday. Okay. So I say that with a disclaimer, not an air quotes, but a disclaimer, in that anything is subject to change based on the extension of deliberation for one or more proposals, on the number of amendments that we get in. So plan on being there at 8 a.m. on Friday, having a break starting at 5 p.m. on Friday, returning at 9 a.m. on Saturday, and then being open to the possibilities for Saturday and Saturday afternoon. My understanding is that when we did this in person, sometimes it didn't end until 7 p.m. I think last year we got done right around maybe 1 o'clock. I'm not quite sure. I can't remember if we had lunch or we ended just before it. Some of you may remember better than I, but again, there's nothing set in stone, but plan on holding your Saturday in reserve if you're the voting delegate. Don't make plans. Who knows how long it will take, but you may get some free time back if deliberations are concluded and adjournment happens early. Okay, that's a draft of the 2-day schedule. Checking questions. There's a question about a parliamentary committee. There is no parliamentary committee. The WSSDA board voted that in place of a PAC, there is a hired parliamentarian in their place. So there is a parliamentarian who is Mike Hoover, who will be sitting on the stage, who you will see beside the presiding officer, so that if parliamentary procedure or a question about it comes up, they will be able to consult on behalf of the membership and provide you with answers as they go. This was a past practice. We used to only have a parliamentarian. We moved to a parliamentary advisory committee when that parliamentarian's contract ended. Tried that out, and then the WSSDA board determined that it would be best practice and most appropriate for membership, and actually better for the school board members who previously served on the PAC if we moved back to a parliamentarian as your guide moving forward. Great question. Okay, just making sure I answered your questions here, so you got that draft. All right, training. I wanted to share with you, this is also draft, a lead up to General Assembly training calendar. So every Tuesday and Thursday in the month of September, we'll give you another opportunity to prepare for General Assembly. So again, in the before times, we had what was called a pre-learning day, something to that effect, where there was actually a half a day set aside leading up to General Assembly, or what was then called Legislative Assembly, because it was just the legislative positions that were debated on. An actual day of learning. So we had expert speakers come in and talk about some of the most relative or highly visible, energetic issues, let's call them. And there has been an ask for that to come back. So because our members are spread throughout the state, and because not everybody will be able to participate in person, we will be doing the pre-learning over a period of time and in a virtual format. It's kind of like, it'll be like a LegRep network meeting, but a lot of them in September. So they will be held between 12 and 1 o'clock on Zoom. We will record them and they will all be available on our YouTube site. They are organized basically by category. So the first 4 are by your categories. So association operations, capital and school facilities, governance, funding and allocations, learning and staffing. And so we will be inviting, not all of this is plugged in, but we will have expert speakers who are not school board members, so they don't have a bias about what position proposals are in the handbook, but rather they have a baseline of understanding of what the current law says, and what the legislators' conversations around these issues might be moving into the next session, which can help inform how you think about the proposals that will be on the table. And then the Tuesday before General Assembly, we will have a General Assembly prep, which will include the advocacy process, Robert's Rules of Order, and technology. So we'll be doing General Assembly prep from 12 to 1 on the Tuesday before and the morning of. So hopefully there are ample opportunities for you to learn about how all of this works. If you can't join one, you can join another, and you can also watch them as a recording. So this is subject to change based on presenters' availability, but you get a sense for how we will be sort of helping you understand the laws and the policy considerations by our legislators going into the next session. So that's that. And I'm not going to share that with you because it's not set in stone and is not ready for distribution until we get our speakers finalized. Some of the people on that list don't even know that they're on the list yet. So we're going to wait for that. I'm sure they're going to say yes. I'm just sure they're going to say yes. And then I think those were the documents I wanted to go through. And the last thing I wanted to share with you is a recording from Mike on parliamentary procedure, Robert's Rules of Order. And you will be the first to get a preview of this. If you stay and watch it, it's going to take us a few minutes past 1. So I know that some of you may fall off. But Mike and I wanted you to have a chance to get the first preview because we want you to tell us what you gained from the video and what else do you need to know. And so the what else do you need to know is kind of an open-ended question because I really want to be sure that when we get to the day of General Assembly, you don't on that day say, I really wish you would have answered my question over the course of the last 6 weeks. I want to know what your questions are now so that we can try as best as we can to answer all of your questions before we get to the day of the event. I recognize you might not know that you have a question until the actual day of the event. That's okay. We are human. You can't prepare for everything, but to whatever degree you have some questions in advance, I want to try to answer them as soon as possible. So if you haven't had the opportunity to interact with Mike Hoover, I will give you a heads up that he tries to use humor for issues that are either otherwise really boring, which you may think of Robert's Rules of Order, or potentially contentious, right? You are all elected officials, so you know that these times are rife with political divisiveness, and to whatever degree we can help to alleviate that through transparency, education and information, humor and grace, kindness to one another, we at WSSDA are trying to help you all be in that space. And so Mike really likes to make fun of himself, really, as a way to go about that. So you will notice some of that humor in this, but hopefully also learn quite a bit as well. So I'm going to play the video. Whitney helped me test the technology before we got started, and it worked before we did this. And then while we're watching the video, please feel free as we're going to type questions into the chat, either about the content of the video itself or about anything else. I will stay on for a little bit after following to field some additional questions you might have. But I understand some of you may need to sign off while this is going on. And if so, thank you for being here, and please reach out with anything else you need. All right, let's try some technology, folks. Let's see how it goes.
Hi, I'm Mike Hoover, and I'm going to be your parliamentarian at the upcoming meeting. What's my background? Well, due to a series of poor life choices, I've been a parliamentarian for over 20 years. I've been a parliamentarian for the Washington State Senate, the Washington State House of Representatives, the King County Council, the Washington State Association of Counties. I've even worked at Carl's Jr. How do you get to be an expert in parliamentary procedure? It's actually quite simple. Just get this book, read it, and commit it to memory. Now, you don't need to do any of that to have a great and successful meeting. And we're going to have a great and successful meeting, and you're going to have a great and successful meeting. All you need to do is remember a few basics, and I'm going to go over those basics in this video. Can I do it in just a few minutes? Guess we'll see. Very generally, there are two elements present at every meeting. There's discussion and there's business. And of course, you could have discussion about the business. I think we all understand what discussion is. Simply put, it's talking, and it's a very important part of the meeting. So what's business then? Business is something that needs a decision by the body. It is a question you are putting in front of the body for them to decide. How do you get business in front of the body? Well, you move it in front of the body, and you do that with a motion. You move that something be considered by the body for a decision by the body. And then you can have an amendment to that motion and an amendment to even that amendment to that motion. Now, when I say amendment here, I don't mean amendment like amendments to your policies. Those are very important. It's some of the most important work you're going to do. But that's not what I'm talking about. Amendment here means just an amendment to whatever the main motion, the main question is that the body is considering and will make a decision on. But this gets a little confusing in the abstract. So let's try to use some real examples. And you may be looking at me and saying, Mike, you are not ready for this meeting. Your haircut is fine, I guess, but you're not dressed appropriately. You should be dressed more formally. I think you should be wearing a coat. So I move that Mike wear a coat. That's my motion. My motion is that Mike be here in a coat. Not bad, right? It's just that easy. But I'm technically not supposed to be in the coat yet because all it is a motion, a question of whether I should wear a coat. I put it on for illustration purposes, plus I got to edit this all myself, so this is the best I can do, folks. There's no budget for any of this. Anyways, the motion was Mike should be in a coat. This is a coat. But somebody says, no, 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 no. I don't like that coat. I would like to see him in a crazy coat. So I would like to amend the motion to be that Mike wear a crazy coat. So remember, we had a motion, the main motion, to bring business before the body for a decision, and that was that I wear a coat. Then we had an amendment to that main motion, that I wear a crazy coat. But somebody can stand up and say, hey, no, 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 no. I would like to amend the amendment to be an even crazier coat, full on crazy. Let's see what that would look like. Crazy enough? We're still okay to make these amendments because we're still talking about the coat. We could probably say crazier coat. We could probably say I'd like him to have a little handkerchief, kerchief, little bit of flair. This is fake, by the way, but you can't tell. We could do those sorts of things because they're still relating to the coat. But what couldn't we do? What we couldn't do is make an amendment that I appear in crazy Hawaiian garb. Why? Because we weren't talking about a shirt and a hat. We weren't talking about crazy Hawaiian garb. What were we talking about? Only whether I should wear a coat and what kind of coat it should be. What style of coat, maybe whether it should have a little flair. We're not talking about any of this stuff, which is a shame because I look great in it. Although, If we were talking about whether I should wear crazy Hawaiian garb, it would be perfectly appropriate to talk about whether I should be wearing a different hat. So long as we're talking about Hawaiian garb, what hat I am wearing fits that, and you can keep making hat amendments because they are germane. They relate to the question in front of us. They relate to whatever they're modifying, whether they're modifying the main motion or whether they're modifying an amendment in an amendment to an amendment case. It just has to keep being related to that, kind of like a funnel. If you want to think of the main question at the top and it getting a little narrower and more specific as we go, that's a good way to think of it. Getting more narrow and more specific usually is germane, and you can do that. What you typically can't do is flip that and get broader. So for example, if we're discussing what garb I should be wearing, it's not appropriate to bring an amendment as to whether I'm taking the bus or arriving in a car. It's not appropriate to do an amendment as to which hotel room I'll be staying at, although I would presume that you would reserve me the nicest suite available, obviously. But it wouldn't be germane to do that. You can't get there because it's not the original question. You'll have to wait and bring your own motion. That's how you would get that in front of us. Now, I think I look good here, but give me a second here. Let me change back. I think that's better. Well, no, hang on. I think that's as good as we're going to get. Let's just go with it. So the important thing to keep in mind in all of this is, where are we in the process? What's the item in front of us? Is it the main motion, the main business in question originally presented to the body? Did somebody bring an amendment to that? And did somebody else bring an amendment to that amendment? And there may not be any amendments, but if there are, they need to be germane. They need to relate to the original question, the original motion that was brought. And the body actually takes those up in reverse order. They first decide the amendment to the amendment, if there is one. Then they decide, and decide means vote, upon whether to accept the amendment as amended, again if it was, and then they take up the final amended motion, the final question. Again, it may not have been amended, but if it was, now the body is going to vote on that amended question. And so in my example, if the original motion was that Mike wear a coat, and the amendment was that the coat have a crazy pattern, and let's say that an amendment to that amendment was that that crazy pattern be gold, the final question before the body is, should Mike appear before the body in a crazy gold coat? And the body votes on that, and they decide it, and that business is done. We're done with coats, which is good news for you, because I know you're sitting there saying, Mike, I never cared about the coats. I'm all about the shirts. And you wouldn't let me talk about the shirts because you said it wasn't germane. You're right, I did say that, and it wasn't germane. But good news, I got you. Now you can talk about the shirts because we're done with the coats. That's old business. We decided that. Now you can bring up a new item for discussion, new business. And you already know how to do that because I talked about it way back there. Remember? You do that with a new motion. You make a motion that Mike appear in a crazy Hawaiian shirt. And then the body can discuss that and amend it and amend the amendments, whatever you want, as long as, again, amendments have to be germane. If we're talking about shirts, well, the amendment has to be about shirts, long sleeve, short sleeve, pattern, that sort of thing. Couldn't talk about hats, which is too bad because I look really good in hats and I proved it a little while ago. But when we're done with shirts, and if the body wants to take up hats, you can do that. That's a new question, and so on and so forth. We deal with the business in order, and we deal with the motions and the amendments in order, one thing at a time, until we get done with that item. Make sense? I hope it does, but if it doesn't, there is a way to get clarification. You can stand up and make a point of order, except in our meetings you don't really stand up. We're in a hybrid situation, so you go to the computer and there's a little pull down, drop down menu, and you select point of order and you say what your point of order is. It could be a question or comment, like, hey, what about rule XYZ? How many votes does this take? Where are we in the process? Where did Mike get that coat and how much did he pay for it? And then the chair will take this up and give you an answer or a ruling as appropriate. Maybe not the coat thing, but everything else. I think you get me. And that's how you can help us stay on track and make sure you understand what's going on and make sure the body is following its own process and that it makes sense to everybody and we can stay on track and have a great meeting, because we are going to have a great meeting. You're going to have a great meeting. I'm looking forward to seeing you there. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you at the meeting.
Okay, oops. Get my screen back on. All right, so one question did come up that is very important. Just to clarify, the types of amendments that he's describing are to motions that members may make during the General Assembly. There will still be opportunity for voting delegates to move to do something, and they will have to specify what their motions are, and those will be made known to you as part of the presiding officer's remarks at the dais, or at the podium, sorry. Get my locations confused a little bit sometimes. So yes, there will be opportunity to amend motions and amendments to motions. But as it relates to amendments to positions, that is what I described earlier in terms of the amendment window right now. So you will not have the opportunity to propose amendments to the proposals in the book, but to amendments by your fellows, yes. Okay, another question. Will there be a way a General Assembly attendees will be able to see where we are in the process on any given item? Yes. One of the screens that you will see, either as a voting delegate, if you're there in person, if you are joining remotely, is we will actually show you on one of the screens where we are in the handbook. And we are actually going to reformat the handbook so that the page number is at the top as well as the bottom. So as we're moving through the proposals, you'll see on the screen that we're on proposal number 12 in the voting order on page whatever the page number that is. So again, we encourage you to have a printed copy of the general handbook beside you, regardless of where you're sitting. But also on the screen, we will track where we're at in the process by scrolling through the handbook. And we will be scrolling through the handbook because that will be the voting order. The only sort of exception to that rule is in the handbook, you'll have the original proposal and then any proposed amendments that came in through this window. We vote on amendments first. So that will be a little bit reorganized, but we thought it made most sense for you to see what the original proposal was and the amendments that came through. But Robert's Rules of Order and also just logic means that you'd vote on the proposed amendments beforehand. I guess that's logic. Does that mean I'm sick? I'm not sure. We've been doing this for too long. Yes, Sarah, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, thank you. And that's really helpful to know that we'll be able to see like where are we in the handbook.
Yeah.
My question was also about like in relationship to what Mike was just sharing, which I thought that video was so helpful.
Good.
And really excellent. When there's those moments of like a motion's been made, and then there's like a motion to amend the motion, or a motion to, or there's a point of order, you know, like the parliamentary procedure starts to get entangled sometimes. So even being able to track like, okay, currently we're considering this, a motion's been made, now there's another motion, so that we can know, like sometimes last year it was hard to know, like, what are we voting on right now? Are we voting on the motion? Are we voting on the call to question? Are we voting on, you know, and so being able to even track, and he laid that out really lovely in that video, which is what spawned the question, was like, oh, I'd love to be able to see like, where are we in this whole series of actions?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good question. Let me take that question back to the team. In the live setting, I'm not sure that we can visually present like typed out where we are at, but I do know that Sandy, who is your presiding officer this year, will be very deliberate about pausing and restating everything. So that will be helpful. You have the advantage of having a presiding officer this year who has actually presided over this event previously, because we used to have the Ledge Committee chair, who she was previously, and the Res Committee chair this. And then we actually read the bylaws and realized that it's the presiding officer as the WSDA board president. Anyway, Sandy's got a lot of experience doing this, so I think that will help pace things as well. So she will be very slow. Both she and Mike have also talked a lot about the benefit of a pause, right? Like, so while I imagine you all will want to get out of there sooner rather than later, we will take our time to make sure that people are able to track what's going on. So it's okay to take a 5-minute break if things need to be reorganized, and we will probably employ that practice regularly throughout the event. So all good questions, though. I'll look in to see how we can further that clarity for participants. Let's see. Any other questions? We will be talking more, I know it, in the next several weeks. Just a note that I will be off the grid the last 2 weeks of August, but you will be able to reach many of my colleagues if you have other questions. So thank you, and we'll be seeing you soon. Bye.